Hi guys, I'm here to talk about 1B today, demonstrating knowledge of your students. I said in my last video that I wasn't gonna focus on the entire first domain, just a few, just like 1A and 1E, but I changed my mind. I'm gonna focus on all of them. I'm actually gonna do every domain and every part of it. I think it's important that, especially new teachers, if you're coming here to get some information and you just need to know what Danielson is about and like a quick take and how to master it, that you get to know each part of it. Okay. So, getting to know your students, it's right in the title. How do you do that? You do that through assessments. So, your school might be doing a lot of digital assessments. So, you might be doing foundations or you might be doing iReady, Acadians, things like that. Imagine Learning. Uh, you're going to be doing assessments from your curriculum. So, depending on the curriculum you have, you're going to have either paper or digital, however you decide to give those assessments. The curriculum that is given by your district. And all of those assessments are going to give you a picture of what your students need. If you're in the upper grades, third through fifth, and you have incoming students who have taken the state exam, I would suggest in September taking a look at that information, just a quick overview to see what are the standards that your kids are going to need some support with. And that's how you get to know your students, right? Individually. Okay, so through assessments, whether it's paper or digital, and through looking over state exams if your kids took those state exams in grades 3 through 5. This is also where you plug in your CSRE, your culturally sustaining, culturally responsive, sustaining education, CSRE. It's a mouthful. So, long story short, is making sure that you recognize each student's culture and understanding where they come from and taking the opportunity within a lesson to tap into their background and how you can make them feel like their voices are heard, right? So this might not sound that important. You know, some people roll their eyes at this, they just want to teach the lesson. So here's why it is important. Because I promise you that if this lesson, your lesson, has no intrinsic value for your students and they can't connect to it, it's going to be an uphill battle. It's going to be an uphill battle in all areas. They're not going to connect to the material. They might struggle to understand it because they can't make any connection to it, right? And you might even have behavioral problems, right? So when you begin that lesson, part of knowing your kids is saying that little story, that introduction into the lesson that brings them in, right? You want to get them up close, right? I do not suggest starting your lesson with everybody in their seats at their desk. No, no. They should be in front of you. They should be right in front of you for that introduction into the lesson. This is how you're going to pull them in, and you're going to lean in close, right? You're going to lean in close and tell them that story, that self-to-text story. You're about to teach a lesson, and you most likely are using a story to teach it. And that can also apply to math, right? You might have a word problem, a little story, right? So once you reel them in with that story, with your self-to-text connection, now you turn it over to them, right? And this is how you get to know your students, and you tap into that culturally responsive teaching, right? What countries are they from? How can you connect this lesson to something that's part of their background, right? Especially if you're in an urban area, you probably have a lot of different kids, multicultural kids. You probably have a lot of English language learners. So one example of this is if you're telling a story about a soccer player or kids playing soccer, right? This is a sport that's played and named differently in different parts of the world. So, right, you'll tell a little warm-up story. Your warm-up story is quick. You're not going on and on about your childhood and what you did and 10 years. No. This is in and out. In and out, a quick story. I don't care if you make it up, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you make it up. The story has one purpose, and it's to reel your kids in so that you can get into that lesson and lock them in, lock their attention in, right? That is what your intro into that lesson is. And I'm going to tell you something. The curriculum is not going to tell you, hey, here's what you need to do to get to know your kids and tap into like CSRE. They're not going to tell you that, okay? So this is why I always tell teachers, if you say to admin, well, I did what the curriculum said. I read the lesson exactly how it's written, right? Curriculums are not written for the kids in your room. Okay, let me say that again. Curriculums are not written for the kids sitting in front of you that are in your room. You need to make a lesson that connects with the kids who are sitting in front of you, and that is going to look different every year, right? But you're going to write that lesson with the kids in mind from the year before. You're going to have the same issues, probably a lot of the same backgrounds, okay? That's informing your teaching and your pedagogy for the next year, right? So you're going to have, dyslexia. You're going to have English language learners. You're going to have kids who are struggling with comprehension. And 1B, knowing your students and getting the data, getting the cultural background, getting all of the data on the assessments, that is going to help inform your teaching every single year. And before you know it, you're writing lessons, you know the kids, you see them in the first 2 weeks, you already know who needs what, right? That's when you really get good. It just starts to become, you just do it automatically, right? And that's when it starts to get fun, because from that point, you no longer have to think about, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? I have to create all these different materials. Once you get to a place in your career and in your pedagogy after really mastering teaching and Danielson, once you get to a point where you've seen all of the different styles of learning, you understand multilingual learners, you understand English language learners, it's going to become real, and you can branch out into creating other materials, and you will come up with a lot of other ideas, and it's going to be a lot more fun. You're going to be able to help newer teachers. You're going to be like, oh, I've seen this before. Here, why don't you try this? I think this might work, right? Share your knowledge. You should be doing that. You should be doing that with teachers, upcoming teachers, because you know what? Somebody's kid is in their classroom. And if it's your kid, you want your kid to be learning the right way. So share your knowledge. Once you get to a place where you know how to assess your students, you know your students, you know what you're doing is working, share it, right? So like I was saying, the curriculum is not going to tell you that. You have to be good enough to know that the way to learn about your students, demonstrating knowledge of your students, that the way to do it is by collecting data, right? And learning about their backgrounds. That's important. Don't just teach that lesson straight. It's not going to go well. Okay? It's not going to be the best teaching. Okay? So once you're done with that lesson, what's another way that you can learn about your students for 1B? Well, the conferencing, right? So once you're done with the lesson and the kids go back to their desk and they're working, you're conferencing. Every time those kids are working, after your lesson is done, 15, 20-minute lesson, 20 minutes max. Okay? You can try doing it for longer, but you'll see that it's not going to work. You're going to lose their attention span, okay? So every time those kids are working, you're conferencing. Don't be sitting doing nothing, because your conferencing is where you're also going to learn about your kids. So however you do it, whether it's small group, or whether you took my suggestion of the calendar where Mondays you see, 3 kids, Tuesday you see 3 kids, and those kids know that they're seeing you, and they know what day they're seeing you, and they know what they need to be working on and answer for the next time they see you, right? So your kids are working on the lesson of the day, the work for the lesson of the day. You're pulling your small group or your one-on-ones. You're conferencing, you're asking them how the work is going. Did they finish, right? And you'll go through it with them. And even if they didn't finish, it doesn't matter. If that's their day, pull them, right? How's it going? Let's get you on the right track. Is it going well? Great. How's that other thing that we talked about last week that you were supposed to work on? Show me where you've made some progress in that area, right? And they should be able to show you, right? So every time they conference with you, they know what to bring. Make sure that your kids know what to bring to that table, whether it's a small group or a one-on-one, and make sure that you also have your tools, your toolkit, right? Whether it's a ruler for reading, something to go line by line because they're getting, they lose focus. You can have some vocabulary cards. You can have pictures. Whatever you need in your toolkit for your conferencing, have it there at the table. Right? Pencils, sharpeners, right? And make sure that your other kids know that they should not be disturbing you while you're conferencing. Okay? Get yourself one of those little closet lights, put it on your desk, turn it on, and train your kids. Let them know when the light is on, ask 3 before me. Don't even come to me. Okay? So you're getting to know your kids through the conferencing. You're getting to know them when they share out after the lesson. You're getting to know them through their assessments. You may choose to do warm-ups. Warm-ups take a little bit of time. I think they're okay if you're doing math, a quick little activity to kind of get the juices flowing with numbers. But for the most part, I don't really do a lot of warm-up stuff. If you feel it's not going to cut into your time, your teaching time, do it. If you think it's going to be helpful, do it. Here's where I would say do a warm-up. If you are, let's say, you're doing an interview and you've been asked to do a demo lesson. You don't know those kids. So whoever is watching you do this lesson is going to be watching not just the lesson that you chose, but how you execute that lesson and how you're going to assess those kids, right? You don't even know what they need, right? So when I was a teacher, every time I would go in for an interview, I had 3 sets of work: low, middle, high. Okay? And I had a warm-up and I had an exit ticket, right? So the warm-up was super quick, right? They're going to answer one question. You walk around, 2 minutes. They have 2 minutes, maybe less, to answer the question. You walk around, you see who's answering what, right? You're going to see who can't answer the question, who kind of has it, and who hit the nail on the head in like 3 seconds. There's your low, middle, high. Now you're interviewing, right? You're going to give your lows to your lows, your middles to your middles, your highs to your highs based on how you walked around and looked at all of those kids, right? In that sense, in that scenario, a warm-up I think is super helpful. All right, whoever is watching you and taking down notes to see how you're doing, they're going to be like, oh, wow, that was quick. She got an assessment in like 2 seconds. She knows who's who in 2 minutes, right? She knew what level of work to give to kids in 2 minutes, right? So in that scenario, I think a warm-up is very helpful. But if you're in the swing of things and you're teaching, jump right in, start your introduction to that lesson, let them do the work, and then you conference with them, right? So 1B, demonstrating knowledge of students, get to know their cultural backgrounds, get all of your assessments out of the way, make sure you're studying those, get data during the lesson. Okay, if you're getting observed, make sure you're getting data when those kids are working. All right, so that could be in your conferencing, or that could be when you walk around, do a quick check-in, right? Maybe you've met with 2 kids so far. You take a 2-minute break, do a little circulating around the class, see what's what, right? Get your clipboard out, right? However you take that assessment of that specific lesson, that's going to inform your next lesson, because that's what admin is looking at when they're observing you, right? How are you assessing, right? You're going to call them back. They're going to share out. Maybe that's how you're assessing. Mark it down. Mark their answers down. If everybody's sharing out, you can write their answers down. Okay, so, but however you're doing it, it has to be done in order to inform your next lesson so you know who needs what. And it's super quick, right? An assessment and learning about what your kids need and who your kids are could be as quick as a T-chart, right? Everybody's putting a Post-it note on a T-chart at the end of a lesson, right? Or at the end of their independent work. That's fine too, but make sure everybody puts their name on it. Right? I've seen too many times where the Post-it goes up on the T-chart and looks great. So when you collect those, how do you know? How do you know whose answer was what? You're not going to know. So make sure their names are on there, because when you go at the end of the day or at the end of the lesson to assess, you can grab all those Post-its and call them up one by one, right? So that's how you learn about your kids. Quick assessments, all of your digital assessments, your curriculum assessments, your conferencing, and learning about their cultural background, okay? All right, I hope that was helpful for 1B.